My parents were standing in front of me, silent and motionless, as though they were awaiting an apology. When my mother did speak, it was in a tremulous, desperate voice. As she looked down, she remarked, "Thank you for coming all this way. We heard that you might be able to save our nearly insolvent factory. We are really appreciative." Even though he was unable to look me in the eye, my father spoke. It was shocking to discover that their own daughter, whom they had left behind in the frigid mountains, worked at the same factory that they were so desperately trying to save. "Let's talk about business," I remarked, attempting to maintain a calm tone. "Please lift your heads." They both looked up in surprise when they heard my voice. I had to chuckle since their faces were nearly comical. Together they said, "Lauren," their surprise evident. So my story started. How should I react to this circumstance? You can call me Lauren Compton. The only developed area in the little city where I live is close to the station. My neighborhood is primarily rural, with farms all around. In the past, my family manufactured and repaired farm tools at a modest smithy. However, we started manufacturing farm machinery parts back when my great-grandfather was alive and eventually constructed a larger factory. Our family gained a lot of local recognition. My mother, Cheryl, is the executive director of Compton Machinery, while my father, Logan, serves as president. Jerry, my older brother, has always been incredibly intelligent and my parents' pride. It's typical for parents in our rural community to have great hopes for their eldest son, and Jerry met those expectations by enrolling in a renowned high school. My brother received a lot of attention from my parents, but I was frequently overlooked. Daughters are viewed as individuals who will eventually leave the family in our conventional way of thinking. They were focused on my brother, who was supposed to take over the family business. Meanwhile, I was ignored and didn't really have any expectations. "You are female. When I was in middle school, my father told me rather frankly, you cannot inherit the family business. Once you finish high school, that's it." I knew where I belonged even at that young age. I chose to concentrate on my education. I had to keep going even if it was difficult for a middle schooler to set such a goal. My sole motivation was to keep moving forward. It was difficult to accept that my brother and I were related because we were so dissimilar. He was well-respected and self-assured, much like the captain of a magnificent ship at school. However, I enjoyed being free and energetic, galloping around the countryside like a goat or a deer. Sports were the one thing I excelled at more than my brother. Even if I was more athletic, I had a difficult existence. I had to put in a lot of effort to study, and even then my grades didn't really improve, in contrast to my brother, who seemed to be born with talent. This difference was immediately apparent to my parents. Frequently, they made fun of me by saying things like, "You're no good. Jerry is not like you at all. Do you not recognize your boundaries?" Even though their remarks were extremely hurtful, I remained furious and upset rather than giving up. I was devastated one day when the results of our school's midterm exam were announced. I put in a lot of effort, yet my grades remained poor. Although my parents pushed, I didn't want anyone to see my report card. Upon examining it, they chuckled and remarked, "This was to be anticipated. Investing in you is no longer worthwhile. It's difficult to accept that you are Jerry's brother. There must be a problem." I silently longed for the time to stop as I sat there listening to my parents reprimand me. My brother intervened at that moment. He was always there for me, even if he struggled to communicate his emotions to our parents. "It might partly be my fault that our parents are so hard on you," he replied, "but I'm here for you always." His comments were like a comforting embrace, and I started crying uncontrollably. His encouragement gave me courage, and I believed that with him at my side, I could conquer any obstacle. I gradually got better in my schoolwork with his aid. My brother left home when I started my second year of middle school after passing the admission exam for a prominent city institution. The emptiness of his former chamber only served to intensify the harshness of the comparison to him. My brother, with his natural talents, seemed to succeed effortlessly, while I struggled in his shadow, still trying to find my own path. I enjoyed running far more than studying and joined the school's track team. Running had always been my passion, and I decided to chase my dream of becoming a long-distance runner. My goal was to get a recommendation from a prestigious school known for its relay team. While my brother was brilliant in academics, he wasn't good at sports. In this one area, I felt I was better than him, but even so, my parents didn't seem to care. They were only interested in his high grades, not the speed I could run. No matter how hard I worked, my efforts went unnoticed. My parents' attention and affection were always reserved for my brother, who continued to excel in his studies. When my brother turned 19, it was a big deal for my parents. They planned an extravagant celebration for his birthday. My mother even said, "Let's get him an expensive watch. If you can't afford to buy such a gift, don't even think about going to university." Her words stung, especially since I didn't have the money to give him anything fancy. As expected, when the day came, my family and relatives gathered at a well-known restaurant for a grand feast. Meanwhile, I was left at home as though I didn't belong there. My mother dismissed me, saying, "Jerry deserves this because he's excellent. All you do is obsess over running. Being there would only make you feel worse." Her words hurt deeply. After they left, I sat alone at home and made myself instant noodles. As I poured hot water into the bowl, the steam rising reminded me of how empty and lonely I felt. Tears streamed down my face as sadness and frustration overwhelmed me. During that time, my brother returned home for summer break. He had graduated and started working at a top company, already carrying the responsibilities of an adult. He seemed more mature than ever. One day, he brought me a surprise. "This is an older model, but it's fast enough for browsing the internet. Give it a try. It might even help you with your studies," he said with a kind smile, handing me a laptop. Then he gave me a book and said, "Try using this too. I think you'll find it interesting." The book was a beginner's guide to programming. That moment marked the start of something new for me. It was my first step into the world of technology. Although I wasn't very good at math and science at first, I discovered that creating my own programs was surprisingly fun. I started using the laptop my brother gave me all the time. Every time one of my programs worked, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Slowly, I began to see a path I wanted to follow. It wasn't entirely clear yet, but the idea of a future in programming was starting to take shape in my mind. However, one day my dream was suddenly crushed by my father. "Are you playing on the computer again instead of studying?" he asked sharply. "I'm programming, not playing," I replied, trying to stay calm. "Don't lie. You're just gaming on that thing," he accused me angrily. Frustrated by his misunderstanding, I snapped back. "People with old-fashioned ideas like you don't understand how to use computers." That comment only made him angrier. "What nonsense are you talking about? Don't speak to me like that, Lauren," he shouted. Suddenly, he grabbed the laptop and, before I could stop him, threw it out the window. "Why would you do that?" I screamed, horrified. "You're still in high school and always playing games. Maybe now with that computer gone, you'll finally focus on your studies," he said, laughing as if he had done me a favor. I ran outside to where the laptop had landed. It was completely destroyed. The screen was shattered, the case was cracked, and it wouldn't turn on anymore. My heart sank as I picked up the broken pieces. The laptop, a precious gift from my brother, and the tool that had sparked my interest in programming, was now just junk. Without any money to repair it, I felt like my dream was slipping away. Standing there with the broken laptop in my hands, I was filled with despair. My brother's thoughtful gift, which had given me hope for the future, was gone. I didn't know how I could continue. The next morning, still weighed down by sadness, I walked to school. That's when a friend noticed my mood and made a suggestion that sparked a tiny bit of hope. "Why don't you use the school's computers? The teacher might let you," they said. I decided to ask, and to my relief, the teacher agreed. From then on, the school's computer room became my safe haven. After class, I'd head there, where a reliable desktop computer was waiting for me. It wasn't fancy or portable like my laptop, but it was sturdy and dependable. That computer became my foundation, giving me a way to keep learning and holding on to the dream I had almost lost. I started spending more and more time in the school computer room. On weekends, one of my teachers, who noticed how passionate I was, offered extra help. Programming became my focus throughout high school, and I worked hard to improve my skills little by little. During the summer of my sophomore year, my brother suggested I join a summer course in Chicago. I saved up for the travel expenses by working part-time jobs. I stayed in the dormitory of the company where my brother worked, dedicating my days to the course and spending my evenings learning from my brother and his unique friend, Brandon. "Brandon's a bit quirky, but he's not a bad guy," my brother said with a grin. "He's just not used to being around girls since he went to an all-boys school, so don't tease him too much." Brandon, pretending to look offended, replied, "What are you talking about? I've had plenty of interactions with girls." "Oh, really? When was that?" my brother teased. During the folk dance in elementary school," Brandon said, his face turning red. We couldn't help but burst into laughter at this innocent and funny moment. Brandon's honesty and quirks added a unique charm to that summer. That summer became a turning point for me. With the encouragement of my brother and Brandon's guidance, my love for programming grew even stronger. By the end of the summer, I felt like I had taken a big step into the world of programming, and it completely captivated me. Brandon was different from my brother. He was polite, refined, and carried himself like someone from a well-mannered family. Although he was a bit eccentric, there was no malice in him, and I found his personality oddly endearing. As I entered the summer of my final year in high school, something unexpected happened. My brother, who had apologized earlier for the destruction of my laptop, returned home during the break with a surprise. He handed me a used laptop and said with a mischievous smile, "This is from Brandon. He's pretty well off, so I asked him if he had any computers lying around, and he gave me this one. He wanted you to have it as a gift." "Why would he do that?" I asked, my face turning red. "I don't know," my brother teased. "Maybe he likes you." Stop saying nonsense," I protested. But my flustered reaction only made my brother laugh harder as he playfully tapped me on the head. That laptop became my lifeline. It wasn't just a computer. It was a symbol of the support I'd received from my brother and Brandon, and it pushed me to work even harder toward my dreams. My brother gave me plenty of advice, and my programming skills improved a lot. One day he said, "I never thought you'd get so into programming." "Yeah, it's really interesting," I replied. "Sometimes things don't work because of a small mistake in the calculations, but solving the problem is so exciting." Programming wasn't just a fun activity for me, it had become my passion. Seeing my own programs come to life was a joy that couldn't be described in words. Driven by this passion, I made a big decision. I decided to leave home, skip university, and take a job in the city at a tech company. With a new computer in hand, I felt ready to move forward and keep improving my programming skills. My journey had only just begun. One cold winter day, as I was preparing for my new life, my parents called me unexpectedly. Normally, their conversations weren't pleasant, so I wasn't hopeful. But this time, it was different. "Let's go on a family trip," my father suggested. Family trips were a distant memory from my childhood, so I was surprised. "My uncle won a hotel voucher in a lottery, and we decided to use it," he added. I felt a bit excited, especially since my brother would be joining us. On the day of the trip, we drove to a hotel in a snowy area with my father at the wheel. My parents seemed unusually cheerful during the drive, chatting mostly about my brother's job and my father's struggles with his factory. As usual, I was left out of the conversation. When we arrived, the hotel was much fancier than I had expected. We relaxed by the pool and enjoyed delicious meals together, but something about my parents' sudden kindness fell off. It didn't seem genuine. Late that night, I woke up to use the bathroom. On my way back, I overheard my parents talking in hushed voices from their room. "We can't keep spending money on her anymore," my mother said. "If we leave her behind, she'll understand," my father replied. "Yes, it's time for a big house cleaning," she agreed. I froze in place, my heart pounding. They were planning to abandon me. I felt like I was meant to be abandoned, and accepting it seemed like the only choice I had. With a heavy heart, I left home. The drive back was quiet, with hardly any conversation. Maybe everyone was just tired. I was supposed to be dropped off at the station and then head straight to the dormitory at my new job. Suddenly, my father spoke up. "I feel like having a coffee. Is there a vending machine nearby?" My brother answered, "There's a parking area up ahead. We can get coffee there." My father smiled, seeming unusually cheerful. "All right, let's stop there for a break," he said. Soon, we reached the parking area, and my father turned to me. "Lauren, go buy us some coffee." As expected, I got out of the car and walked to the vending machines. I chose hot coffee for my father and brother, tea for my mother, and grabbed a milk tea for myself. But as I turned to head back, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. My father was unloading my suitcase from the car. "Well, this is goodbye," he said casually. "Driving you all the way to the station takes too much time and fuel." I stood there in shock. "Wait, isn't the station still far from here?" "You can figure it out, run or walk. You were on the track team, weren't you? You should have the energy," he said coldly. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's time you managed on your own." "All right, cleaning complete," he added. His words cut deep. "You really were just a piece of trash getting in the way." I looked at my brother, hoping for support, but he said nothing. Instead, he gently placed my cat on top of my suitcase. Standing in the snowy parking lot, I watched as the car drove away, disappearing into the distance. Tears blurred my vision, but somewhere in my heart, I realized this was the start of something new. My old life was over, but maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward a fresh chapter. 15 years later, I returned to my hometown. A lot had changed. I was now thriving as a project leader at a successful company. The reason for my visit was work-related. There was a project at the local factory. Returning to this place stirred up a mix of excitement and old, painful memories. As the familiar factory came into view, I heard a voice that made my heart skip a beat. "Lauren." I turned to see my brother stepping out of a car, smiling and waving as he walked toward me. "I was worried you might get lost," my brother said. As we approached the factory, the scenery had changed a lot. "No worries," I replied. The GPS worked perfectly. Without missing a beat, he started talking about work, about the project. "The client has high expectations, so we need to be ready." I smirked playfully. "Let's see how long you can keep that energy." "Don't underestimate me," he shot back. "I've toughened up a lot in the city." "You've really grown stronger," he said, clearly impressed. "It's because I've been pushing myself," I replied. "You naturally get stronger when you work hard." This reunion wasn't just by chance. It was all because of this project. My brother, with his experience in a large corporation, had started his own company. Using his expertise in mechanical engineering, he created innovative products. His work had begun to catch attention in the market, offering hope to struggling businesses. Now, our hometown factory was in trouble, facing a serious financial crisis. That's why my brother had reached out to me, proposing a new project to help turn things around. "Let's get going," he said, and I nodded, gathering my thoughts as we headed toward the factory. As we opened the doors, a cold draft greeted us, carrying the faint scent of the past. It brought back a wave of memories, bittersweet and distant. This place wasn't just a factory, it was where I had grown up. The air felt like a quiet awakening, stirring emotions I hadn't felt in years. Then, as if on cue, the curtain of a long-forgotten play lifted. In front of us stood my parents, motionless, their expressions unreadable. "Thank you for coming all this way," my mother finally said, her voice low, her eyes looking down in desperation. "We heard you might be able to help our nearly bankrupt factory, and we're deeply grateful," my father added, still avoiding eye contact. "We truly appreciate it." "There's no need to be so formal," my brother said, his tone calm but firm. "No," my mother insisted. "We must show our sincerity to you, our important guests from Brandon Industries, all the way from Chicago." As they continued speaking, I decided to steer the conversation. "Let's focus on business matters," I said, keeping my tone professional. At the sound of my voice, they froze. Their bodies stiffened slightly, and they slowly raised their heads to look at me. That voice, "It's familiar," they murmured, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. Finally, recognition dawned. "You know it can't be. Lauren, is it really you?" I stood there, watching their shocked expressions, and couldn't help but smile slightly. Yes, it was me, Lauren. I couldn't help but laugh as they finally realized who I was. "Yes, it's me, Lauren," I said. "The one you left behind in the snowy mountains." They looked stunned. "How are you here?" "We were told someone from Brandon Industries would be coming." "Well, I'm the one they sent," I explained. "I'm a project leader at Brandon Industries. Brandon's father is the president. After you abandoned me, Brandon, who was a friend of Jerry, stepped in to help me." My brother had seen this coming and made arrangements to protect me. I paused, looking directly at them. "It wasn't easy, but I've built a life for myself. I've established a career, and I'm married now. My husband is a department head at Brandon Industries. The president personally assigned me to lead this factory's rejuvenation project. Do you understand now?" My parents stood frozen, and I continued. "At the time, my brother was furious with what you planned to do. Before that trip, he talked to Brandon and prepared for the worst. On the day it happened, my brother gave me a note that read, 'Our parents intend to leave you behind. If anything happens, call this number.' As expected, when it happened, I called the number. Brandon answered right away. He later admitted, a little embarrassed, that he'd taken paid leave in advance just in case I needed help. He came to pick me up immediately." I paused, the memories still vivid in my mind. When he arrived, I told him how heartbreaking it was to be abandoned like that. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I spoke. Brandon didn't say much. He just quietly loaded my luggage into his car and drove me away from that snowy place. I smiled softly. After that, I started working at a company in Chicago, which turned out to be a subsidiary of the company run by Brandon's father. With the support of both Brandon and my brother, I worked hard and studied at the same time. A year later, I enrolled in a night university, balancing work and education. After graduating, I transferred to the main company where I could use my specialized knowledge. I took on a role in construction management, and over time I built my career. Looking back, I added, as Brandon got promoted, I began working closely with him while leading a project under his direction. My respect for him gradually turned into love. Eventually, he proposed and we got married. I stood there facing my parents, their shocked faces unable to hide their guilt. My journey had come full circle, and now I was the one offering them a lifeline. I kept working and got involved in a project that focused on bringing production back to local factories. Due to the strong currency and rising labor costs overseas, manufacturing abroad was becoming less profitable. Companies started looking for cost-effective and efficient options, leading to a renewed interest in domestic production. While searching for a new factory location to match these trends, I received unexpected news from my brother. Our family's factory was in serious financial trouble. The factory, which used to supply machine parts to large companies, had been lowering its prices to compete. But this strategy had pushed it into a corner financially. Taking this situation seriously, my brother and I decided to visit the factory together. When we arrived, my parents' attitude changed completely. Seeing me as a representative of Brandon Industries, they suddenly became confident. "Now that Lauren is here, we have nothing to worry about," my father said. "It's only natural for a daughter to help her family in tough times." I looked at them calmly and said, "I think you might be misunderstanding something. I don't see you as my parents anymore. My relationship with this factory will only be business-related." Their expressions changed, and my mother snapped, "How can you say such a thing? How can you be so heartless? I didn't raise you to be this way." Although they were angry, I remained composed. "The current state of this factory is the result of your poor management. Because of this, we will be replacing the entire management team with staff from headquarters. In other words, your time here is over." My father's face turned red with frustration. "You can't do that. The factory can be sold to pay off some of the debts. I can still manage it after that, right?" I shook my head firmly. "I cannot trust this factory's future to you. What do you plan to do about the remaining debts? This rescue effort is only happening because of Jerry's hard work. As for your lives going forward, that's your challenge to face. Good luck." My brother and I turned and walked away, leaving our parents sitting on the floor, powerless. "Well, that's finally settled," my brother said. "It's not really the end," I replied. "It's just the beginning. This place will become a domestic production hub soon. With the production management system you developed and the new machine tools I've designed," my brother added, "we can aim to be the best in the country, right?" "Not just the best in the country," I said, smiling. "We're aiming to be the best in the world." Sharing a laugh, we both felt hopeful about the future. As expected, our parents sold the factory, but the money wasn't enough to cover all their debts. Even so, we were ready to rebuild from the ground up, fueled by a shared vision of success. I heard my parents are now working in a freezing place. They've asked us for money several times, but we've ignored them completely. Still, I couldn't just do nothing. So I decided to send them some disposable hand warmers I had collected during my college years. It was a small, ironic way of giving back, considering they once left me out in the cold. In the meantime, the factory we bought has undergone a whole makeover. It is presently flourishing and bursting with fresh life following restorations. Everything has been concentrated at the plant, including transportation, inventory control, and manufacturing. It has received a great deal of praise and produced jobs for the neighborhood. I've been collaborating with my spouse on new initiatives to grow our division even further. We intend to concentrate on establishing solid business alliances and assisting American enterprises in entering foreign markets in the future. Even though we lead hectic lives, We usually find time to visit that far-off hotel a few times a year. I get a pull in my heart every year when the snow begins to fall and I think about that parking lot. I ended up going back to the location this year. The question my spouse asked gently was, "What are you thinking about?" Reflecting on the past again. "Yes," I said with a gentle smile. "This place holds so many unforgettable memories." "Me too," he said with a smile. "It all started here." I chuckled. "I recall that day. Your face was as red as a boiled octopus, despite the fact that it was midwinter." "You're one to talk," he teasingly admitted. "Your face was so red, you looked like a little kid." We exchanged glances before laughing out loud. I said, "Thank you, I love you," with a nice sensation in my heart. "No, thank you," he said, grinning. I compared life to a book composed of numerous stories. These kinds of moments make up the chapters of our relationship's history. Additionally, this chapter is among the most exquisite.